You are living a lie. Every morning you wake up believing you're in control, that today will be different, that you'll finally break free from the patterns that have been slowly destroying you. But by evening you're back where you started, trapped in the same cycle, feeding the same destructive habits, wondering why you can't seem to change. This isn't about willpower. This isn't about motivation. This is about forces operating within you that you don't even know exist. Right now, as you read these words, there's a war being fought inside your mind, a battle between two primal forces that have been shaping every decision you've ever made, every impulse you've ever felt, every moment of self-sabotage you've ever experienced. One force drives you toward life, growth, and creation. The other pulls you toward dissolution, destruction, and ultimately a kind of psychological death. And here's the terrifying truth. The destructive force is winning. You've felt it, haven't you? That strange resistance that emerges whenever you try to change, that voice that whispers it's not worth the effort, that invisible hand that pulls you back to your phone, to that extra drink, to that toxic relationship, to that mindless scrolling session that leaves you feeling empty and defeated. You've dismissed it as weakness, as lack of discipline, as character flaws, but it's none of those things. It's something far more profound and far more dangerous. What you're experiencing is the manifestation of what Sigmund Freud identified over a century ago as the death drive, what he called thanatos. This isn't some abstract psychological theory. This is the hidden engine driving your most destructive behaviors, the invisible puppet master pulling the strings of your self-sabotage. And the most insidious part? Your own brain has learned to reward these destructive patterns with pleasure, creating a neurochemical prison that keeps you trapped in cycles of behavior that you consciously know are harming you. Every time you reach for your phone instead of working on your goals, every time you binge-watch series instead of pursuing your dreams, every time you choose immediate gratification over long-term fulfillment, you're not just making a poor choice. You're feeding a psychological force that seeks to dissolve your potential, to numb your consciousness, to return you to a state of non-existence. And your brain, hijacked by modern stimuli, rewards these choices with dopamine, making you crave more of what's slowly killing you. The human psyche, according to Freud, is driven by two fundamental forces locked in eternal conflict. The first is eros, the life drive, the force that compels us to create, to build, to love, to grow. Every time you feel inspired to learn something new, to connect with others, to pursue a meaningful goal, to take care of your health, that's eros at work. It's the energy that built civilizations, created art, advanced science, and drives human progress. It's the force that wants you to thrive, to expand, to become more than you are. But operating alongside eros, equally powerful and far more insidious, is thanatos, the death drive. This isn't a conscious desire to die, it's something much more subtle and dangerous. It's an unconscious impulse that seeks to reduce the tension of existence, to escape the effort and pain of living, to return to a state of absolute rest. In ancient Greek mythology, Thanatos was the personification of death, and Freud recognized that this same force operates within every human psyche, constantly working to undermine our efforts at growth and self-improvement. In your daily life, Thanatos doesn't appear as a dramatic death wish. Instead, it manifests as procrastination, as addictive behaviors, as the tendency to sabotage your own success, as the pull toward activities that provide temporary relief but long-term harm. It's the force behind your compulsive social media usage, your tendency to avoid challenging tasks, your attraction to toxic relationships, your reliance on substances or behaviors that numb your consciousness. Every time you choose the easy path that leads nowhere, every time you avoid discomfort that would lead to growth, that's Thanatos speaking through you. What makes this particularly dangerous in the modern world is how sophisticated our methods of self-destruction have become. We no longer need to seek out obviously harmful behaviors. Instead, we're surrounded by activities that feel pleasurable in the moment, but gradually erode our potential, our health, our relationships, and our sense of purpose. Social media platforms are designed to hijack your attention and keep you scrolling endlessly. Streaming services create binge-watching patterns that consume hours of your life. Food companies engineer products that trigger addictive responses. Dating apps commodify human connection in ways that prevent genuine intimacy. All of these modern phenomena serve as perfect vehicles for Thanatos to operate through. They provide the illusion of pleasure while actually serving the death drive's deeper purpose to dissolve your agency, to fragment your attention, to keep you in a state of passive consumption rather than active creation. And because they're wrapped in the language of entertainment, convenience, and connection, you don't recognize them as expressions of a destructive force operating within your own psyche. The neurochemical mechanism that makes this possible is both elegant and terrifying. Your brain's reward system, evolved over millions of years to help you survive and thrive, has been hijacked by artificial stimuli that trigger dopamine release without providing genuine satisfaction. Dopamine isn't actually the pleasure chemical as many people believe. It's the wanting chemical, the neurotransmitter that drives you to seek and repeat behaviors that your brain has learned to associate with reward. Every time you engage in a behavior that provides even temporary relief or stimulation, your brain creates a neural pathway that says, "Do this again." It doesn't matter whether the behavior is actually beneficial or harmful. If it triggered a dopamine response, your brain will drive you to repeat it. This is how habits form, how addictions develop, and how self-destructive patterns become entrenched in your neural circuitry. In the modern world, we're constantly bombarded with stimuli designed to trigger these dopamine responses. Every notification on your phone, every like on social media, every bite of processed food, every episode of that series you're binge-watching, creates a small hit of dopamine that reinforces the behavior. Over time, these small hits add up to create powerful compulsions that can feel impossible to resist. This is why you can know intellectually that scrolling through social media is a waste of time, yet find yourself doing it compulsively. This is why you can understand that binge-watching series is preventing you from pursuing your goals, yet continue doing it night after night. This is why you can recognize that certain foods make you feel terrible, yet continue eating them. Your conscious mind knows these behaviors are harmful, but your unconscious mind, driven by Thanatos and reinforced by dopamine, keeps pulling you back to them. The most insidious aspect of this cycle is how it disguises destruction as pleasure. Thanatos doesn't announce itself as a death wish. Instead, it whispers sweet promises of relief, of escape, of instant gratification. It tells you that you deserve this break, that you've earned this indulgence, that it's not a big deal. And because these messages are accompanied by genuine neurochemical rewards, they feel true in the moment, even when you know they're leading you away from your deeper goals and values. This is the invisible cycle that traps so many people in lives of quiet desperation. They're not actively choosing to destroy themselves. They're simply following the path of least resistance, guided by forces they don't understand, toward outcomes they never consciously chose. Day by day, decision by decision, they're feeding the very forces that are slowly killing their potential, their dreams, their vitality. But recognizing this cycle is the first step toward breaking free from it. When you understand that your self-destructive behaviors aren't personal failings but expressions of deep psychological forces, you can begin to develop the tools and strategies needed to reclaim your agency. The battle between Eros and Thanatos is ongoing, but it's not predetermined. With awareness, effort, and the right approach, you can learn to strengthen the life-giving forces within you while managing the destructive ones. Understanding the forces of Eros and Thanatos is just the beginning. The real challenge lies in recognizing that you are not the unified, rational being you believe yourself to be. Your psyche is fractured, divided into competing parts that often work against each other. creating the internal resistance that sabotages your attempts at change. This is why knowledge alone isn't enough. This is why you can understand exactly what you need to do to improve your life, yet find yourself unable to do it consistently. Freud revolutionized our understanding of human psychology by revealing that the ego, the conscious part of yourself that you identify with, is not in control. As he famously stated, the ego is not master in its own house. The decisions you make, the behaviors you engage in, the thoughts that occupy your mind are all influenced by unconscious forces that operate below the threshold of your awareness. These forces have been shaped by your earliest experiences, your family dynamics, your cultural conditioning, and the accumulation of every pleasure and pain you've ever experienced. The human psyche operates through three interconnected systems. The id represents your most primitive impulses and drives, including both eros and thanatos. It operates according to the pleasure principle, seeking immediate gratification without regard for consequences or reality. The id doesn't think, it simply wants. It's the part of you that reaches for your phone when you're bored, that craves sugar when you're stressed, that seeks escape when life becomes challenging. It's pure impulse, pure drive, pure want. The superego represents the internalized voice of authority, morality, and social expectations. It's the part of you that judges, criticizes, and punishes. The superego is what makes you feel guilty when you engage in behaviors you know are harmful, but it's also what can paralyze you with perfectionism, self-criticism, and shame. It's the harsh inner voice that tells you you're not good enough, that you don't deserve success, that you should be doing more, being more, achieving more. Caught between these two forces is the ego, the part of you that tries to navigate reality while managing the competing demands of the id and superego. The ego is what you consciously identify with, but it's far weaker than you realize. It's constantly being pulled in different directions, trying to satisfy unconscious impulses while avoiding the criticism of the superego, all while attempting to function in the real world. When you try to change a destructive behavior, you're not just dealing with a simple habit. You're confronting this entire system of competing forces. The id wants immediate pleasure and will resist any attempt to delay gratification. The superego will judge you harshly for your past failures and create anxiety about your ability to change. The ego, caught in the middle, becomes overwhelmed and often chooses the path of least resistance, which usually means returning to familiar patterns, even when those patterns are destructive. This is why willpower alone is insufficient for lasting change. Willpower is a function of the ego, and the ego is already overwhelmed by the competing demands of the id and superego. When you rely purely on willpower, you're essentially asking the weakest part of your psyche to overpower the strongest parts. It's like trying to control a wild horse with a silk thread. It might work for a short time, but eventually the stronger forces will prevail. The situation becomes even more complex when you consider the role of unconscious guilt and self-punishment. Many people engage in self-destructive behaviors, not just because they're seeking pleasure or avoiding pain, but because they unconsciously believe they deserve punishment. This often stems from childhood experiences where love and approval were conditional, where mistakes were met with harsh criticism, where perfectionism was demanded but never achieved. When the superego becomes overly harsh, it can create an unconscious need for punishment that manifests as self-sabotage. People will unconsciously choose behaviors that lead to failure, disappointment, or suffering because part of them believes they deserve these outcomes. This creates a perverse cycle where the very attempt to change can trigger self-destructive behaviors, as the unconscious mind seeks to maintain familiar patterns of guilt and punishment. This is why many people experience what seems like mysterious resistance when they try to improve their lives. They'll start a new exercise routine and then get injured. They'll begin a new business venture and then make decisions that ensure its failure. They'll enter into a healthy relationship and then sabotage it with jealousy or withdrawal. These aren't coincidences or bad luck. They're expressions of unconscious forces that fear change and prefer the familiar pain of known patterns to the unknown challenges of growth. The modern world compounds these psychological challenges by providing endless opportunities for the expression of thanatos through seemingly innocent activities. Social media platforms are designed to be addictive, using variable reward schedules that keep you endlessly scrolling in search of the next dopamine hit. Streaming services remove friction from entertainment consumption, making it easier to binge-watch for hours rather than engage in more challenging but rewarding activities. Food companies engineer products that trigger addictive responses, making it difficult to maintain healthy eating habits. All of these modern phenomena serve as perfect vehicles for the death drive to operate through. They provide immediate gratification while undermining long-term well-being. They offer the illusion of connection while actually isolating you from genuine human relationships. They promise entertainment while actually numbing your consciousness and preventing you from engaging with the challenges that would promote growth. The key to breaking free from these patterns lies not in fighting against them with brute force, but in understanding and integrating the competing forces within your psyche. This requires a different approach than most self-help advice suggests. Instead of trying to eliminate negative impulses, you need to learn to work with them. Instead of judging yourself harshly for your failures, you need to develop compassion for the parts of yourself that are struggling. True transformation begins with making the unconscious conscious. This means paying attention to the subtle ways that thanatos manifests in your life. It means recognizing when you're choosing immediate gratification over long-term benefit, when you're seeking escape rather than engagement, when you're numbing yourself rather than feeling your emotions. It means understanding that these choices aren't moral failings, but expressions of deep psychological needs that require attention and care. The process of change requires you to gradually build new neural pathways that serve eros rather than thanatos. This means finding sources of genuine pleasure and fulfillment that don't rely on artificial stimulation. It means developing the capacity to tolerate discomfort, to sit with difficult emotions without immediately seeking escape. It means learning to find satisfaction in growth, in challenge, in the process of becoming rather than in the temporary relief of consumption. This is not easy work. It requires patience, persistence, and often professional support. But it is possible. The brain is plastic, capable of forming new connections throughout life. The patterns that have been reinforced through years of repetition can be gradually weakened and replaced with healthier alternatives. The key is to approach this process with compassion rather than judgment, understanding that change is a gradual process rather than an overnight transformation. The ultimate goal is not to eliminate thanatos entirely, which would be impossible, but to develop a healthy relationship with these forces within yourself. This means recognizing when you're being pulled toward destructive patterns and having the tools to redirect that energy toward constructive ends. It means understanding that the discomfort you feel when trying to change is not a sign that you're doing something wrong, but evidence that you're challenging entrenched patterns that have been serving the death drive. When you begin to break free from these cycles, you'll discover that the life force within you is far more powerful than you realized. The same energy that has been driving your self-destructive behaviors can be channeled toward creativity, growth, and genuine fulfillment. The challenge is learning to distinguish between the voice of eros, which calls you toward life and growth, and the voice of thanatos, which calls you toward dissolution and escape. This knowledge isn't just theoretical, it's a practical tool that you can use to transform your life. Every moment presents a choice between serving the forces of life or the forces of death. Every decision is an opportunity to strengthen the patterns that serve your highest good or to reinforce the patterns that keep you trapped in cycles of self-destruction. The choice is always yours, but now you have the awareness to make it consciously rather than unconsciously. The journey toward freedom from these destructive patterns is not a destination, but an ongoing process. It requires constant vigilance, regular self-reflection, and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths about yourself. But for those who undertake this journey, the rewards are immense. The recovery of your authentic self, the ability to create the life you truly want, and the freedom to express your full potential without the constant sabotage of unconscious forces working against you.